I am tuning in from Salvador, Brazil. This is our seventh day on uh, the Wake tour at Indigo Arts, where there's about 25 of us on this wonderful cultural immersion and art excursion, where every day, and we're tired, let me tell you, we are going to museums, galleries, meeting artists. I'm becoming really inspired. One of the things that I really appreciate about um, being in Brazil is uh, the beautifulness of women and people that look like me. You know, living in Maine, it's very vanilla state, and for me, sometimes I don't have the mirror of other beautiful, I want to say chocolate older women. So black older women. Um, I don't have that mentoring of beauty and grace and aging here, unlike if I go down to Brooklyn, New York City. And so one of the things that was really nice was just to see how, average women, um, but the different levels of beauty and grace and the respect for themselves from the elders. So we went to a contemplate temple ceremony, which is similar to temple ceremonies I've been in the Yoruba tradition in Brooklyn, New York, for example. And just the reverence and the respect and the grace the sisterhood had in this temple, and it's a temple of Oshun, and it's a matriarchal clan. So just seeing that too was another piece that was really beautiful. For me in the States, there's been a lot of pain connecting with, and I want to say this in a certain way, doing some works with black women, chocolate women in the States. We come from so much different background. We have so much historical history that has us really competing against each other. And I'm not saying that women around the world are not catty or some of these things that women do, but there's a certain history and pride in Brazil amongst women that's very different than what I saw in the United States, even what I saw different in Jamaica. Um, there's a real cultural and pride around the history that binds together around uh, people of the Afro-Brazilian from the slave trade, but also from the indigenous cultures here. So people don't realize that Brazil is one of the first ports, one of the first places that the slave trade, the Portugal people brought people to. And so there's a really deep history of liberation, solid, a shared collective history. I think that's an important missing piece about in the Americas. And you have to remember something else. In the America, well, let me back up a little bit. So a lot of people from in the slave trade, we forget, also come out of Angola, um, Bantu, Congo, these places, and of course, the Ivory Coast as well. So there's a history of the Maroons here. So it's really interesting, this shared collective history. I think in the United States we have the purposefully also separation around the slave trade and how it was done in the Americas, which was a little bit different. I think Portugal as a whole had a very specific way in which they did the slave trade, whereas in the Americas it was, there were just different dynamics and different groupings of people. Um, so I think that plays out into the intergenerational pecking order, intergenerational collective memory, um, in the internal racism. But here they're very clear about the internalized imperialism, colonization, and yes, both countries have a lot to do with colorism, and Brazil colorism is very big, even amongst the different variations of chocolate and brown people, right? Um, but there's also a unifying piece that's Brazilian. Maybe that's a different. Then here in the United States, there's this thing, African American, I don't know, Creole, Mississippi, Alabama versus Vermont, Virginia. So I think there's like these really fractionated identity. America itself is a fractionated identity, right? Um, and it's still funny that vanilla people in America still don't recognize uh, black Americans as Americans. What do I mean? One of the sisters was sharing about how she was in another country. I think I want to say an Asian country, not the Philippines, not uh, maybe Bahia, maybe I can't remember really right now. The country's coming up, Malaysia. I think it was Malaysia, and she said that she was talking to somebody, and they really, when they found out that she was black and American, and a professor, and a researcher, they were like, "Oh, I need to take a picture to show my wife." And there's a code in there, right? Like that this is a black person that's from America, and I take this picture to show you, like, I met this black person from America here, and I want to show, I want proof of this, who this is. So that's a really interesting dynamic that uh, America has versus Brazil. Um, there's still like a unified understanding of being Brazilian, whereas in America, we still do not have a unified understanding of being Americans. And then our colorism and racism fractionate us even more, right? And then there's the internalized piece even more, right? So um, I am tuning in because I'm reflecting this journaling, kind of a verbal video about this trip. And um, yeah, I wanted to check in about reflections that I'm noticing about myself here. Um, there's a certain ease also traveling with the group and meeting some of the people here, all these great artists. And the artists that we're meeting, by the way, are like levels of like metropolitan art in America or Guggenheim or Museum of Natural History and Culture. Like the artists that we're meeting are like um, established professional artists that we are connecting with. So, and in asking these questions about who they are, and a lot of their art is related to their historia, right? The lineage, the pride. You have to remember that Bahia started with museums and cultural historical museums, maybe started slowly in the 60s, um, but a lot of things didn't get established till maybe the 80s. So it's a really big, important time in Brazil around art and culture and history and these preservations in the artists that is being formed. It's different from me as an African American, um, and a woman as abstract expressionist, I guess you can call me. But that's kind of the lens. But I'm an interdisciplinary artist. But what's nice to see is, for me, there will be hints of this woven into my art. Um, my approach is a little different in terms of, because my process is soul mapping. But I'm curious to know when I get back to the States, what soul mapping will come through in terms of this connection and understanding about myself and the culture of the people here. Many of the artists we met are men and women, but there's a particular reverence but I feel for the women, and there's a certain respect for women artists here that's different than in the States. I think in the States, women are still fighting, you know what I mean, Dan, as they're fighting to that recognition. And I think here, it's more about being the artista, the artist, rather than the gender specific. Another thing I noticed in Brazil that's very different than the States, there's a lot of transgender community, a lot of uh, a lot of gay and lesbian communities. I want to talk about a term that growing up we used to call, and this wasn't a slang. We used to say he she's, and we had queens, we had uh, transvestite. I grew up and clubbed with in the garage days a lot of queens and people who call themselves trannies, transvestite. But here, there's a lot of transgender people. They work in the museums. Um, it's very commonplace culture, and you're not dealing with this whole pronoun things and it's like this friction. It's just all part of the culture. There isn't this demand for, uh, you know, they, them, he, her, all these type of things, which is really refreshing because I don't have to worry about that stuff here. It's more about you call me as Isimo, they'll tell you who they are, their identity. But I think also because there's a fluidity here in Brazil around um, gender identity or sexuality. I notice a lot of street workers, a lot of sex workers, um, just very open and very mingled into the communities. Whereas I remember in New York, there were specific areas where you would connect with the street workers, with the sex workers. I'm not saying there's in areas like that here, but it's more commonplace, woven into the communities. Uh, Everyone's just part of the communities. Everybody knows who everybody is. And there's no like differentiating, oh, you're a sex or a sex worker, or whatever that thing. At least in the few days I've seen that hasn't shown up. Um, yeah, so that's really different to see the fluidity of sexual orientation and gender that's more commonplace. That is not something that's opposition or fighting or something in your face. I have to call me this. Um, yeah, I don't know behind the scenes, like in the schools and the sports, how this stuff plays out. Um, but yeah, so that's my little just take away 7 day here. It is, I don't even know what day this is, March 2nd, 2026. It is, there's a certain level of exhale, maybe that's the word, that I feel being here. Um, so I'll tune in tomorrow with some more insights around this photo, I guess I'm doing a um, video journal. So my name is Keita. I'm going to sign off. Buon noche. And I shall see you tomorrow, another day. Yeah, Brazil is teaching me a lot about me. Okay, buon noche.